Hi, and thanks for joining today's webinar on Foreign Trade Zones with SAP GTS 11.0. We have presenter Aaron Scholl with us. He'll be walking us through the ins and outs of foreign trade zones. Aaron is a senior GTS consultant and licensed custom broker at Krypt Inc. On the next slide, I'll quickly go over some housekeeping tips. If questions do arise during the webinar, please feel free to type them into the GoToWebinar panel as shown in this example. We'll address questions at the end of the presentation during the Q&A portion. Now on the next slide, I'd quickly like to introduce Krypt. Krypt Inc. is the leading SAP Global Trade and Supply Chain consulting partner. We have over 350,000 hours of SAP consulting in various industries. We provide services such as implementations, upgrades, customizations around various SAP solutions, including trade, warehousing, transportation, financials, and HANA. We do offer custom solutions, integrations, and we work closely with SAP for ramp-ups and testing. On the next slide, I quickly wanted to touch on some of our published pieces. As you can see, we've authored several books, and I mention this because most recently we've published Part 1 and Part 2 of the Practical Guide of SAP GTS, and this includes the SAP GTS 11.0 features, including foreign trade zones. We authored this book with one of our customers, actually Kevin Riddell from Tremco. Now moving on to the next slide. This is just a quick recap of what qualifies us for foreign trade zone projects. We are involved in SAP GTS pre-launch testing. We were the first SAP partner to do an FTZ project, and we also have experts who can help with FTZ roadmaps and requirement analysis. Now, without further ado, I'll hand it over to our presenter, Aaron Scholl.
Thank you, Kylene. Before we get started, I wanted to introduce myself, and then after that, talk a little bit about what we're going to be going over in the next hour or so. My name is Aaron Scholl. As Kylene said, I'm a senior GTS business consultant at Krypt. I'm a licensed customs broker, and I have about 20 or so years in import, export, and trade compliance. Most recently, I have about 7 or so years in implementing SAP GTS, both in the United States and in the EU. The objectives today are really to give you an overview of, first of all, what a foreign trade zone is, just kind of a level set, and then go into some detail showing some screenshots and functionality and process flows on the functionality of GTS 11.0. We'll talk about the purchasing, how to enter into a free trade zone or foreign trade zone, the production process, inventory management, reporting, and then exiting the FTZ, either export for, or exiting the FTZ for an export, or exiting the FTZ to import that into the United States. And so when we're talking here about FTZ, we're specifically talking about the foreign trade zone process in the United States. The new functionality in GTS 11.0 specifically addresses the US FTZ process. Existing GTS functionality did cover for several years and still does the European FTZ-like process, customs processing in customs warehouses. The new functionality that's introduced about over a year or so ago is specifically for the United States, and that's what we'll be talking about today. And then at the end, about a case study, and this is we've worked with a major manufacturer in actually proof of concept and implementation of the GTS 11.0 FTZ functionality. So we'll talk a little bit about lessons learned in that process. This is aimed at an audience with a general level of interest in GTS, and also for people who are interested or are starting out or actually have current FTZ operations. The GTS functionality is aimed specifically at importers who are both the operator and importer of the FTZ. Your specific process may vary depending on the agreements that you have with customs, but the process that I'm going to show are basically the general out-of-the-box standard delivered processes. First of all, just to level set, we'll talk about what is a FTZ. FTZ is an area that is essentially outside of the territory of the United States. And in this special zone, foreign and domestic merchandise can be brought in and still be considered to be outside of the customs territory. The duties are paid only at the time that the goods are transferred outside of this special zone into the U.S. to be entered for consumption. Essentially, while it's in the FTZ, the materials are, again, not considered part of the U.S. commerce, and as such, there's no duties or taxes paid. So this creates a special set of circumstances that can be very advantageous for manufacturing and simple import operations in terms of cost reduction. FTZ is similar in concept to a bonded warehouse, which is another way of importing merchandise into the United States. But there are some significant differences in the laws that govern the two different processes. The advantages of an FTZ is that there's essentially no time limit for importations, where bonded warehouses do impose a limitation on time. FTZs have a provision that there's a way to save on merchandise processing fees, and we'll talk a little bit about that. There's savings if there's manufacturing done within the zone. There are savings on scrap and waste, and that can be reported as scrap. And when the material finished goods are imported, that no duty needs to be paid on a scrap. And foreign and domestic merchandise can be commingled inside a FTZ. So these are the major financial benefits, and really these benefits can be very important depending on the type of business that you run and your specific process and your supply chain. One of the biggest benefits is that there's duty deferral, in that merchandise can be brought into the zone without paying duties and stored there indefinitely. If merchandise is brought into the zone located in the U.S. and then it's determined that the goods shouldn't be imported, they can be exported without paying any duties. Duty reduction is possible in that two different component materials from abroad can be brought into the FTZ. Manufacturing can be done on that, and then duties would be due only on the rate of the manufactured good that comes out of the zone. So what this means is if your components have a high duty rate, you manufacture them into a finished good that potentially has a low duty rate, then there can be duty savings on that final product. Another very, very important benefit is customs fee reductions. The merchandise processing fee can be paid on a weekly basis. In other words, consolidating multiple entries and then only paying a merchandise processing fee on a weekly basis rather than a by transaction basis. And then some FTZs have local provisions that about inventory tax. Some specific states have that to basically encourage this type of activity, manufacturing and trade within certain geographical areas. So here are just some examples, and I point these out because it's important to understand the benefits, because along with these benefits comes obviously some compliance responsibility and process responsibility to run your FTZ according to the customs regulations. But basically what I'd like to show is that GTS can achieve that in a relatively easy way while still giving these substantial benefits. So again, an example of savings on the merchandise processing fee Here's an example where an importer has about 2,000 annual entries. If they didn't have the FTZ process, they'd be paying this 485 maximum MPF on each one of the entries, which would be $970,000. If they were able to bring these 2,000 into the FTZ, those number of entries could be reduced to 52, which is basically one entry filed per week. And the 485 on the 52 would be this. So this is basically the savings just simply on the MPF saving. So again, if you're a very high volume importer, you have very high amounts of merchandise processing fee payables per year, it really pays to look into the potential for using FTZ to reduce those. Broker fees, again, if you're able to take on more of the process internally and rely less on a broker, it's possible that you can reduce your broker transactional fees if you're using a broker. We talked a little bit about the property tax. Supply chain, if you're subject to the standard import process and using those materials for manufacturing, there is a way to basically speed up that process by using a approval for entry, and we'll talk about that process here. It's called the direct delivery process. And then another potential savings is that, again, merchandise brought into the zone is not subject to duty. So potentially you could bring production equipment or something and use that for a period of time, and then when that equipment became obsolete, it'd be potentially possible to export that without ever having paid an import duty. So again, there are just different scenarios, and understanding your business and where the import costs are can really help you determine if FTZ potentially could be a solution to some of those. So after now just understanding those benefits, we'll talk a little bit more about how FTZ works in GTS 11.0. One of the important things to know in the beginning here is the integration with SAP ECC system. GTS is essentially a bolt-on designed by SAP to work with both SAP ECC systems as well as other systems. But the true benefits come when pairing the GTS with your SAP ECC system. So if you do have a SAP ECC system, the integration is basically out of the box and seamless. So the different processes are in the purchasing, it goes into an FTZ admissions process. Production, inventory storage, again, there's integration between the production process and ECC and the inventory posting process in SAP GTS. And then exiting the zone, either for domestic consumption or for export, the integration is with FTZ goods issue process. So there's very tight integration with ECC, SAP ECC, and actually even the look and the feel, and we'll see when we see some of the screenshots, are very, very similar, if not almost identical to SAP ECC system. So from a user standpoint, it's basically looks very familiar to a user. And also from an IT standpoint, there's basically the same process for security and IT support that you have in ECC can be extended to GTS. So those are just some of the benefits of integration. So we'll talk about now what is the high-level process. To get into a foreign trade zone, you're importing material from overseas. The first step in this would be filing a pre-arrival, and again, GTS can handle that with messaging from customs declaration. The process, the part we'll talk about most in this presentation is the arrival, FTZ process, and then the import and export from the FTZ. So the material arrives, you're required to file a notification and a permit to transfer. So it goes from the port on IT transportation and then gets received into the FTZ. Then that FTZ, you make inventory postings based on the custom status of what you're bringing into the zone. And then to, first of all, export it to a foreign country without ever entering customs, you would file a AES filing and a 7512, and that would report the export and then allow you to do a goods issue out of the zone for export. Or if you're importing into the United States from the zone, you'd be filing, you have several different options, but you'll file your entry and entry summary and move the goods out of the zone, and then they'll be posted as import into the commerce of the United States. So first, we'll go from the arrival into the zone and then out of the zone. So here is the main SAP GTS user interface. And anyone who's familiar with SAP, this will look very familiar. And if you are using GTS today, this will look very familiar. Here's to launch export processing, import processing, and then special processing for SAP calls it Inventory Managed Customs Procedures, which is basically FTZ. And there's a new tab with GTS 11 called Foreign Trade Zone, and here are some of the specific functionalities, and we'll get into more detail on these later. So the inbound process, you have two options of processing inbound into the FTZ. The most common is called the non-direct delivery. And what this requires, according to the regulations, is a submission and approval of a customs CF 214 admission document. This only requires basically your standard approval to have a FTZ. It doesn't require any special approval. There is another process available, which is called the direct delivery process. And this is in case your business requires a very quick transaction time between when the goods arrive at the port and when they are received into the FTZ. So you can make a special application to be able to execute this direct delivery process. And this allows you to simply post an in-transit IT move with customs before you're required to issue this customs form 214. And again, this is designed for shipments where timing is critical and supply chain transit time is critical. It does require additional approval, and customs needs to understand the types of materials that are going to be processed under this. SAP GTS does handle both of these processes, and we'll talk in more detail about each one. But first we'll talk about the non-direct delivery. Again, it's the most common scenario, and customs requires that you post with them an entry document before you get to receive the goods into the FTZ. Well, here's a flow chart, and at first it may look a little confusing, but I'll try and take you through each step. Well, first, in your SAP ECC system, or if you're not using ECC, if you're using another source system, you would post typically a purchase order. In a GTS, that purchase order is interfaced into SAP GTS, and then different compliance checks are done in terms of sanctioned party list screening and other import compliance checks. After the goods after you receive a notice either from your supplier about inbound delivery or from transportation service provider, you can post inbound delivery. And typically that would then involve issuing of what's a document called a customs waybill. And this is actually, I believe, new functionality in GTS 11.0. Basically, this customs waybill captures the transportation information and makes that available to the subsequent documents in the process. So you would create a customs waybill either manually, or this actually could be created automatically from an interface, either from your source system or from a service provider. This customs waybill then is available in a document work list that enables the user to then create the admission document. So this admission document is created, and again, this admission document potentially could also be auto-generated from a previous process. It just basically depends on the process that your company follows and your approval for the FTZ. So this admission document then can be filed with customs, or if your business process does not allow or does not cover filing directly with customs, there's a process that you can send this admission message to your customs broker, and then your customs broker can then forward that on to the customs authority. So again, it's flexible enough to handle either issuance of these documents through a broker or directly with customs. The advantage, obviously, with customs is that the direct link of information enables you to both open and close a in-transit process and other things. But if you do not have a direct link with customs or not envisioning that, it's possible to do this through a broker as well. So this admission message is received. The next step then is, once that admission is filed, is that you file the transit, the permit to transfer. And again, that PTT is actually generated from this admission document. So all the information that was in the customs waybill and the admission document, and actually in the purchase order, is aggregated and automatically flows to the next document in the chain. And again, that helps you save a lot of time in rekeying information, because the source information, once these documents are linked together, the source document can provide data and update to the target document. So this PTT is generated off the admission. PTT, permit to transfer, is filed with customs. And then at that point, for the non-direct, you're allowed to receive goods into the FTZ. So that goods receipt is posted in your source system. That stock receipt is received by GTS, and because you've already made these document links before, it understands that this goods receipt relates to these permit to transfer. That closes the transit procedure, closes that IT, and once you've received your goods and you have compared what was in the customs waybill and the shipping information with the quantity that's actually received in your warehouse, then you can file this concurrence, and that concurrence closes out that waybill with customs. So if there's any kind of discrepancy between what was originally reported in this admission and what was actually received in the goods receipt, you can report that to customs, and that avoids a lot of issues with reconciliation and things. So quickly, we'll go through how does this look in GTS. This is the screen for creation of the customs waybill. So this is, in the normal process, this would be created with reference to the inbound delivery and the purchase order. So the link between those documents can be made at the time that this is created. If, however, your business process is that perhaps the PO is not known, or perhaps even the PO hasn't been entered yet, you can create this waybill in advance and then at a later time link that up with the purchasing document. The next step then is from this document, the customs waybill, you're able to go into a work list and see all the waybills that have been created and post a regular admission. So what that will do is take that purchase order, delivery, waybill combination from the work list and create another document called the customs declaration. And as you can see here in the document flow, this admission document is being created with reference to that bill of lading. Further to this admission document, an admission number is generated when creating that admission document. And the number of packages that are in that previous document in the bill of lading will flow into this admission document. And again, as I said, be available for the subsequent documents. All right, so we've created our admission. How do we communicate that? So in the admission document, there's a communication tab at the header, and there's various messages that are available to send depending on how the system is configured, depending on the material, the process, and so forth. It'll generate different messages available to send. The standard messages that are delivered with GTS are this admission. There's an admission PDF, so if you need to actually have a paper PDF image of that admission, you can print that here, and also the concurrence message. So these can be generated as messages, as electronic messages, or they can also be generated as documents, depending on your configuration here. So this message is used to submit directly with customs, the CF E214. All right, now we've filed with customs our admission information. Now we need to file our permit to transfer. So based on that admission document, you can open what's called a transit procedure, a permit to transfer. This document represents the inbound movement of that imported merchandise. Customs regulations say that the PTT can file approximately up to 5 days before the estimated arrival. And again, this PTT, permit to transfer, can be communicated with the customs authorities or your customs broker. Now that permit to transfer has been filed, we're able to post a goods receipt. And then after inspection of the goods receipt, we can file a concurrence. So again, this concurrence document is created. Now we'll talk about the direct delivery process, which again, bring goods into the zone, only this time without using a entry document. This is only allowed after application and approval. First step, again, starts with the customs waybill, but instead of a admission document, we directly file the permit to transfer with customs. Once that's filed, we're able to receive the goods. After receiving the goods, we can send the admission document to customs. And then again, the concurrence closes out that inbound movement. Same way we create the waybill. This time, we're creating the permit to transfer with reference to the waybill instead of the entry document. Message is filed with customs on the permit to transfer. At that point, goods receipt is open to us. We receive the goods. When the goods are received, they'll be posted to inventory, and we'll talk about inventory in a minute. The goods will be available to be processed on a local LCA clearance document. So each waybill will correspond to a local clearance document. These local clearance are the working document to support the daily admission. So with this direct process, we really only need to file one admission document. So if we have multiple shipments during the day, those can be consolidated and reported to customs on at the end of the day or the beginning of the next day on a admission document, a daily admission. This daily admission document is generated typically for a range of the previous 24 hours, and we'll collect all those waybills that were received. Once that's posted, the concurrence will close the bills of lading. So that's a high-level overview of the two main processes in getting goods into the FTZ. So once goods are in the FTZ, there are special processes per the customs regulations, how those need to be reported and how record keeping needs to be done. So here are the key points of how you need to track this inventory. You need to have records of all merchandise that comes into the zone. So the zone is very prescriptive in terms of the location, and then goods coming into and out of the zone need to be, there needs to be records kept as to why and how and the reason for coming into and out of the zone. The location of the merchandise needs to be recorded in your system. The zone status, we'll talk about this in a minute, but basically the type of merchandise, whether it's import or domestic, and if it's import, whether it's privileged, foreign or not, the status needs to be recorded in your inventory. And then just like any inventory record keeping system, you need to keep track of beginning balance, receipts, and the current balance. And if you have a production process within the zone, and that production process results in any waste or byproducts, you need to have a system of reporting those to customs. And then valuation. So you need to keep records of your valuation. So again, all this information is supported by your ECC inventory record keeping system. That data is basically enriched in GTS with this additional information needed by customs. So the two systems work together to create a system of record that's required when you're running FTZ operations. So here we talked about the zone status. These are the different zone statuses that the inventory posts to. It's privileged status. On prior agreement with customs, you determine whether you want to pay the duty on the that's in place at the time of import into the FTZ. Those are called privileged status non-duty paid materials. Or if the goods are used in a production process, they would typically have non-privileged status, duty unpaid. That means the duty would be paid on any finished goods rate if that good is used in production. Domestic status goods can also be posted to FTZ inventory, and domestic status would be any inventory where its material has been imported into the U.S., so it's duty paid. There's no duty due on the materials, and typically this would be any materials that are used in the production of with these imported goods. The most common inventory accounting method that is done is the FIFO, first in, first out inventory maintenance. But if another type of inventory record keeping system fits your business better, if you agree with customs, there are other methods available. And again, GTS and SAP ECC support that. So here are some of the inventory reports that are available. This is a stock overview report. So by product, it shows you the quantity that's in the FTZ. and the inventory status, whether it's privileged or non-privileged, and it gives you the quantity of those. So again, this meets the customs record-keeping requirements of segregating or being able to report your inventory by different inventory status. From here, you can drill into the specific transactions that support this inventory quantity. And here is a copy of that sort of drill down report. So what we're looking at is a record of receipts and issues into the FTZ. And if it's a plus, it's a receipt. If it's a minus, it's a goods issue quantity. And what is the supporting document number? So this would be the material document, in other words, the posting that results in either goods issue or goods receipt. So again, you can post that back there. You can track back on the transactional level to all the balances that are in the FTZ inventory. And these documents link back to your inventory system in ECC. So if you're using FTZ for production, you will have basically production processes carried out in your ECC system. So there'll be production orders created. Goods will be moved into the production process, and then so there'll be material documents pulling the goods out of an inventory into a production process. And then when that production process is over, there'll be goods issues out of that production process. So again, there's integration with the ECC in that the GTS records those inventory movements at the appropriate level required by customs. So when goods are brought into a production process in ECC through a process order or other process, they get posted to GTS as work in process stock. Once the finished goods are created, there's a reduction in the work in process stock, and then a new goods inventory posting for the finished good product. So again, it mirrors what's happening in your system of record for production. So if customs has issues or questions about how you arrived at inventory balances, you're able to support that in great detail back to your source system and your system of record in your production system. Here is an example of showing a detail. You can drill down by the work in process stock. So again, here we have a material that shows how many units are work in process, how many are privileged foreign, non-privileged, duty paid quantity. At each of these levels, you can drill down to see, all right, what were the supporting transactions that created that inventory? And so another benefit of the integration with your source system is that based on the bill of materials, the production bill of materials used in your source system, that will support the different inventory postings into GTS. All right. So we've brought our goods into the FTZ, we've ran our production processes, we've potentially created finished goods. Now, getting the goods out of the FTZ. There's basically two ways to get the goods out, is either to export, and that would be exporting outside of the United States, or bringing those into the United States, in which case, because they're foreign goods, they need to be covered by an import entry and potentially have duties paid on them. So the first process is export. We're going to be taking goods in FTZ and have them leave the commerce of the United States. So again, the process is started in ECC with a sales order. That again creates a customs document where compliance procedures are performed on that, sanction party and embargo and screening and so forth. Outbound delivery and a pro forma invoice is made for that export. That generates a work list in GTS. That work list is triggered basically understanding that the sales order has a destination outside of the U.S. and other indicators would make it appear in the work list. The user can go in that work list and generate a customs declaration. Closing portions are processed, and this can be a background process. That declaration is filed. The goods issues then on that export declaration update the inventory layers, and then this export declaration, when it's issued, it would be assigned to the different closing portions based on the inventory record keeping process. So if it's a first in, first out, this export declaration would be tied to the previous stock layers corresponding to the first in, first out process. And then the inventory reduction is made. So again, you process your stock issues, you create your export declaration from the work list. There's a job that pulls in the inventory postings. You file this export declaration with customs, and again, that export declaration for record keeping shows a link between the different inventory layers that you reduced your outbound movement with. In this case, the customs status was duty paid, so it looks like we're exporting something that had already had duty paid. So this potentially could show that you have an opportunity for drawback here. Normally this would be duty unpaid. All right, so that's the export process. Now, how do you import into the Commerce of the United States merchandise that's in your FTZ? Again, it starts with a sales order, customs doc, work list. In this process, you're able to file a weekly estimate of your importations from the zone. This is basically depending on if you have a repeatable process that goods are, you can basically forecast what's coming into and out of your zone. This weekly process can be advantageous in that you can reduce the number of entries that you file. If you really can't estimate how much is coming out of your zone, you may need to do a daily process. But for most FTZ operators, the benefit of in reducing the fees is that you can do a weekly entry summary filing. So I'm showing this weekly process. So what you do is you create a forecast. Stock issues are posted. You send that estimate to customs. Closing portions are calculated. Stock issues are generated, and then the weekly entry summary is made and then filed with customs. And again, that should be at a maximum of 10 days after the weekly has been filed. The estimate, if you're using the estimate process, should be filed on or before a 7-day period which the merchandise is to be withdrawn. On this forecast, if your estimate exceeds your actual withdrawals from the FTZ, then the customs considers that excess not to be entered. However, the problem is if the estimated removals are less than the actual, that's a problem. So again, it's very important to be able to forecast with some accuracy these estimated withdrawals from the FTZ. If you get into the situation where the estimated removals are less than actual, you do have an opportunity to file a supplemental filing. Okay, so the first step in this process is to create your forecast. So you create a forecast document for the week, and this forecast is at the level of the tariff number. So it's not at an individual material level, it's at the level of your tariff number. Process issues, and then you're able to generate what the 3461 forecast entry. You can file that again, file it with customs by launching this transaction to send an EDI message or to your broker or to customs. And then you need to process the during the week your goods issues. And this can be done in a background job. And then your 7501 reports your actuals that were entered for consumption in the previous 7-day period. So your CF7501 will relate back to that estimate and report the actuals. And again, the communication process is similar to the other documents. Select that and communicate that. The messages received back either from your broker or for customs will appear in a log, and so you can see what type of response you've received for each of those messages. All right, so that's...
Aaron, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to do a quick time check. I know we're getting to the end of the slides as well, but just a quick time check, about 12 minutes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Penny. Okay, so what are some of the reports that are available? So the standard reports that are available are monitoring reports to help you monitor your day-to-day activity, and here are some of the key reports. There's also statutory reports, and these are reports that customs requires for you to support your inventory postings. And the most important ones are the year-end close and the quarterly summary report. So I'll show just quickly a few examples of those. Here's some of the monitoring reports, and again, they can be very detailed. You also have reports that show you errors, so if you do have inventory postings that the system doesn't recognize, you're able to go in and correct those. Then here's an example of the year-end close report, and again, it was designed to specifically meet the requirements of customs. These reports, especially the detailed reports, can be displayed in GTS, or the output can be to a spreadsheet or to enable use in Excel of that data. All right, so Krypt was basically the first company to help an importer actually use this process and help. We helped on a proof of concept with the importer, and also now are working with the some of the development work. So just in general, this customer is a global machinery and heavy equipment manufacturer, and the reason they wanted to use GTS in their FTZ process is that their legacy system just didn't fit their needs. There's a large amount of manual off-system processes involved, and obviously they're concerned about compliance. GTS enables you obviously to use your system of record to support your FTZ activity. So after working in this implementation, there are some takeaways that really can help your success if you are interested in using GTS as your FTZ solution. It's very, very important to do a thorough end-to-end blueprinting process so that issues are identified as early in the process. And understanding the complexity of integration with the production process, with materials management purchasing process, with the SD process, and all the different processes really come together in GTS. So it's very, very important to understand all the points of integration and any process variances that you have, any customizations that you may have in these different processes, to really bring everyone together and help them understand the importance of integration and being able to predict the type of information that's coming into the system. So especially issues around different movement types that you may have in your source system and how these integrate and what are the expected results of these different movements in terms of posting inventories for reporting to customs. And also really understand your bill of materials and how it integrates to the materials that are being produced in your zone. Reporting requirements, both operationally and any agreements you have with customs, those are very important to understand and how those will be met by the system. And look beyond the happy path, the high level, to all the exception processes that you may have in your business. And those exception processes most commonly would be returns, any cancellation process, reversals, those types of things. So there may be very specific processes that you have that may or may not be standard. So understanding how those integrate with the rest of the system is very important. And then also understanding your business model in terms of whether you're interested in filing direct with customs or filing through a broker. And that can have implications back through how this whole process is designed and what types of documents. And it's really important to really understand what your business model is for that. So right now, I think we have about 5 minutes or so, and I can open it up to questions.
Thank you, Erin. And yeah, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to type them into the GoToWebinar panel. If we don't get to all the questions, we'll be sure to follow up with an email. We have one question. What is PTT? What does that stand for?
Right, yes, I'm sorry. Oh. That's a permit to transfer. And really that equates to the in-bond movement that's required to move the goods from the port of import into the FTZ. Those movements, because the goods haven't been entered into the commerce of the U.S., need to be recovered by a bond that your carrier has to transport those materials, those imported materials. So PTT stands for Permit to Transfer.
Thank you. We have one other question. It says, is Seaburger the standard EDI solution to go with GTS in the U.S.?
Yes, that is. It's the standard converter that GTS uses to convert the messages from GTS, converts them so that they can be transmitted to the customs authority, and it's basically the authorized converter for that use in the U.S.
Okay, we'll just give it one more minute to see if other questions come in. And again, our contact information is listed here, so if you do have any questions after the webinar that arise, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to set up a call or answer some questions via email. Another question is any customer live that you know in the U.S. with FTZ and GTS so far?
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, you know, not that I know of, but, you know, our customer right now, we're keeping all customers' names private at this moment. I don't know, Erin, did you have something that you wanted to touch on that?
That's exactly my understanding as well.
Okay. And we will be sending out this presentation to those who attended, yeah. Okay, well, it doesn't look like we have any more questions. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Again, our contact information is here. Feel free to reach out, and we hope that you found this presentation both educational and entertaining. Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.